Carl Jung once said that whatever we ignore within ourselves eventually dictates the course of our lives. And nowhere is this more evident than in our closest, most vulnerable moments with others. When we share physical intimacy, we're not just exchanging pleasure, we're exchanging unseen frequencies, stories we never told, and emotions we didn't even know we carried. Intimacy is not just about touch. It's a merging of fields, a blending of inner histories, a dance between energies that don't always leave when the body does. That's why some connections linger like healing light, while others haunt like a shadow you can't shake. Have you ever walked away from someone feeling strangely heavier, like something inside you was taken, or perhaps you felt an odd sadness days after a connection that seemed casual on the surface? These feelings are not accidents. In the spiritual world, every intimate encounter is a transmission. And what's being transmitted isn't always just love or desire. It could be loneliness, fear, or even the weight of someone else's past that now rests inside you. Most people don't realize this, and yet their mood, focus, and even creativity begin to shift. They blame stress, timing, or bad luck, but the truth may lie in what they absorb. Energy doesn't ask permission. It flows freely between people who open their bodies without guarding their spirit. And unless there's awareness, that openness can become a doorway for energies that do not belong to you. It's not about shame or judgment. It's about understanding. Intimacy, when shallow or unconscious, can leave behind more than memories. It can leave behind pieces of someone else's emotional world embedded in yours. That's why it's possible to feel lost after certain encounters, even if everything seemed fine on the surface. But the opposite is also true. When intimacy happens through real presence, mutual care, and spiritual alignment, something extraordinary unfolds. The energy becomes sacred. It replenishes instead of draining. It clarifies rather than confuses. It roots you more deeply into your purpose, your power, your peace. This kind of connection doesn't leave you second-guessing your worth. Instead, it amplifies the truth of who you are. And in those moments, your spirit remembers what intimacy was always meant to be, an act of elevation, not erosion. That's what we'll explore in the journey ahead. The silent forces that shape your energy through intimacy, the difference between sacred union and energetic leakage, and how understanding this can help you not only reclaim what was lost, but create new relationships from a place of conscious strength. So stay with me, because by the end of this, you'll never view intimacy the same way again. When two people come together in intimacy, something far greater than physical closeness occurs. It's not just a meeting of bodies. It's a fusion of memories, feelings, hopes, and hidden wounds. Beneath the surface, there is a quiet merging, an invisible blending of energies, like two rivers intertwining and carrying each other's stories downstream. Some of these stories are beautiful. Others are heavy with grief or fear. And without realizing it, we take those stories home with us. They become part of our emotional landscape, showing up in dreams, behaviors, and sudden waves of emotion we can't always explain. Have you ever walked away from an experience that was supposed to be joyful, yet felt emotionally raw or unsettled afterward? Like something inside of you had been cracked open, even if no words were exchanged about it. That sensation often comes from the energy you unknowingly absorbed. You may have taken in someone else's pain, their anxiety, their buried shame, and because it doesn't speak in a language the mind can understand, it shows up in ways that feel strange, like restlessness, disconnection, or even a deep, unexplainable sadness. Jung spoke often of the unconscious forces that steer our lives, those emotional undercurrents we haven't named, but that still influence every decision, every bond. And during intimacy, these forces don't remain hidden. They emerge. When you open yourself vulnerably to another, you're not just sharing pleasure, You're opening the door to the psychic material you've both been carrying. This is why some people feel energized after intimacy, while others feel drained and hollow. It has nothing to do with appearances or words. It has everything to do with energy. And this energy doesn't just shape emotions. It shapes outcomes. Sexual energy, in many sacred traditions, is considered a raw creative force, capable not only of producing life, but of manifesting desires, fueling ambition, and clearing emotional blocks. But that same force, when muddied with confusion or absorbed wounds, can begin to scatter. You may find your motivation fading, your clarity dissolving, or your goals becoming harder to reach, not because you're incapable, but because your energetic field is no longer whole. This is how cycles form. Quietly, subtly. A person seeks intimacy to escape loneliness or fill a void. But instead of feeling replenished, they walk away carrying even more of what they were trying to avoid. And so they seek again. Another connection, another brief moment of relief. And with each encounter, their energy becomes more fragmented, more scattered. What was meant to soothe becomes what slowly exhausts. What was meant to connect becomes what silently disconnects them from themselves. And yet, most never question this. They attribute their emotional fatigue to work, to circumstances, to a bad day. They don't trace it back to the moment they opened themselves to someone carrying unresolved energy. But the body remembers. The spirit remembers. The heart knows when something precious was exchanged without balance. And unless we learn to become conscious of these exchanges, we remain trapped in a loop, searching for connection, but leaking our power one encounter at a time. There are moments after intimacy when the silence feels too loud, when you lie awake and something just doesn't feel right, though you can't explain it. You retrace your steps, searching for a reason why your heart feels unsettled or your thoughts are suddenly clouded. But the cause isn't always logical. Often, it's energetic. It's the residue left behind by an unseen exchange. Something you absorbed, something that wasn't yours, now sitting quietly in your nervous system. A heaviness that wasn't there before. And it lingers not because of the act itself, but because of the depth of unconsciousness that surrounded it. Many people think they can walk away untouched, that as long as they don't develop strong feelings, there's no lasting effect. But energy is different. Energy attaches itself to places where the soul has opened. It doesn't ask how long the connection lasted or whether you called it love. It moves through presence and vulnerability. And if the person you were with carried unresolved emotions, grief, guilt, fear, you may now be carrying a piece of that within you. You may be hosting emotions that have nothing to do with your own past, but now weigh on your heart like they do. And it's not just about pain. Sometimes, after certain encounters, people notice a fogginess in their thinking. Decisions become harder. Motivation slips. It feels like something is tugging them down, yet they can't quite pinpoint what it is. These are not random emotional fluctuations. These are spiritual consequences of unconscious union. Every person you connect with leaves an imprint, a vibration that echoes within you. And if you're not aware, those echoes accumulate, creating confusion, disconnection, and even emotional fatigue. Jung once said, "We meet ourselves time and again, in 1,000 disguises on the path of life. And in intimacy, we meet ourselves most clearly. Not because of the other person, but because of what gets stirred in us. We project our hidden needs, our fears, our hopes, and those projections often blind us to what we're truly engaging with. That's why some relationships feel magnetic at first, only to unravel into disorientation. The attraction was never just about the person. It was about a mirror reflecting back parts of yourself you haven't yet healed. This is why it's so important to become intentional. To ask yourself before any encounter, what am I really seeking here? Am I looking to connect, to share, to grow? Or am I running from loneliness, from boredom, from my own unspoken wound. Because when intention is absent, energy leaks are inevitable. You walk away feeling drained, not because someone stole from you, but because you gave away more than you knew, pieces of your spirit scattered without direction or return. But here's the truth that often gets buried beneath shame or avoidance. You can call your energy back. You can cleanse what lingers and reclaim what was unconsciously surrendered. And once you begin doing that, everything begins to change. You start to feel lighter. Your emotions stabilize. You begin to understand that intimacy is not about fear or withdrawal, it's about power. And your power returns when your awareness leads the way. The question most never ask themselves is, how much of my energy is still living in places I've left behind? In people who are no longer in my life. How many silent echoes of past intimacy still pulse through my emotional field, subtly influencing how I think, feel, and respond today? These aren't abstract reflections. They're real energetic imprints. Our essence doesn't just move on when we do. It leaves trails. And without conscious closure, those trails stay open. They drain us quietly, like invisible wires pulling at our strength and attention. This is why some people feel stuck after a series of shallow relationships. It's not the quantity that affects them, it's the fragmentation. With each unintentional encounter, a small piece of themselves gets left behind. Not because they gave too much, but because they didn't pause to understand what they were giving. Desire without awareness becomes disconnection in disguise. The more you seek to fill an inner void without clarity, the more that void deepens, and no amount of experience can compensate for that kind of spiritual absence. And yet, we're not taught this. We're told to move on, to forget, to try again. No one speaks of the energy that lingers, of the way our bodies remember, of how certain moments, though brief, become embedded in the nervous system, altering the way we receive love, give affection, or even pursue our goal. If you've ever felt yourself change after being with someone, suddenly more uncertain, more restless, less grounded, it's likely not just emotional, it's energetic. A part of you is still engaged in a connection that should have ended, not just physically, but spiritually. But here lies a beautiful truth. Just as energy can fragment, it can also return. The pieces of yourself that feel scattered can be called home. Not through anger, not through regret, but through presence, through choosing to see what once happened unconsciously and now meet it with full awareness. This act alone, of recognizing, of reclaiming, is one of the most powerful forms of healing you can experience. Because you're not rejecting your past. You're realigning with your present. You're saying, I know who I am now, and I choose to be whole again. When intimacy is lived with consciousness, its effects are radically different. It nourishes. It doesn't take. It roots you deeper into your clarity, into your joy, into your purpose. You walk away feeling expanded, not reduced. Your energy doesn't splinter. It becomes focused, alive, and in this space, connection becomes a gift, not a gamble. You begin to attract people who meet you with the same level of presence you now embody. People who give as much as they receive, who understand that sharing energy is a sacred act, not a transaction of need. So how do you tell the difference? How do you know if a connection elevated you or depleted you? The answer lives not in your thoughts, but in your body. It's in the stillness you feel afterward, or the agitation. It's in whether you wake up the next day feeling aligned or distracted. Your nervous system is your guide. Your spirit speaks through sensation. And when you learn to listen, you'll never again ignore the messages intimacy leaves behind. There is something sacred about the way our energy speaks long after our words are gone. Long after the lights are out, long after the touch fades, there is a residual frequency, a signature left behind by every encounter. You've likely felt this without even knowing what to call it. That unexplainable mood shift, that sudden drop in motivation, that strange emotional pull toward someone you no longer want but can't seem to fully release. It's not obsession. It's not weakness. It's the open channel you never close. In intimacy, the body may move on quickly, but the soul operates on a different timeline. It needs acknowledgement. It needs clarity. When energy is shared without intention, it can remain unresolved for years. Sometimes it's not the heartbreak that wounds us. It's the energetic residue that never got cleared. You can cut off communication. You can delete a number. But unless you retrieve what was energetically given, the thread still exists. And that thread, no matter how invisible, has weight. It pulls on your joy, your focus, and sometimes even your destiny. This is why some people struggle to build something new. Their energy is still partially invested in the past. They're still energetically tied to experiences that were never closed with presence. And so every new relationship becomes a repetition. Not because they want to repeat it, but because their spirit is still entangled with old vibrations. The same patterns reappear. The same emotional disappointments cycle back. And underneath it all is not a lack of desire for something better, but a lack of energetic space for it to land. Jung believed that the unconscious is always guiding us, until we make it conscious, and this is exactly what happens in intimacy. The unconscious parts of ourselves, our wounds, our desires, our fears, are all stirred in the exchange. If we're not paying attention, those parts take over. They choose for us. They attract for us. And they leave us wondering why we're stuck in a loop we never consciously created. That's not fate. That's simply energy in motion, guided by shadows, instead of clarity. But you can shift this. The moment you begin to ask, what energy am I allowing into my space? What am I giving that I don't even realize? What are my intentions when I open myself to someone? These questions become the foundation for transformation. You stop living from habit and begin choosing from truth. You stop reacting and begin creating. And suddenly, intimacy becomes a mirror that reflects your strength, not a cycle that steals. From this place of self-awareness, everything starts to change. You become more discerning, not closed, but wise. You recognize when a connection feels whole and when it feels heavy. You no longer second-guess yourself when something doesn't feel right, because now you understand the language of your energy. You honor your intuition, your rhythm, your soul's timing, and in doing so, you reclaim a power that no one can take from you. You might be wondering now, can I really get back what I've given away? The answer is yes, but not through the usual paths. Not through ignoring, distracting, or rushing into something new. Energy doesn't respond to denial. It responds to attention, to reverence, to stillness. And sometimes, the most healing thing you can do is pause. Not out of fear, but to listen. To let your body speak. To let your soul show you where it still hurts, where it still waits for your return. Many people carry a kind of fatigue they don't understand. Not the tiredness of the body, but a deeper weariness of the spirit. A sense of being scattered, pulled in too many directions. Uncertain why joy feels fleeting, or why peace slips through their fingers. This exhaustion is not caused by age, work, or daily stress alone. It's often the result of unacknowledged energetic debts, pieces of themselves left behind in places that no longer serve them. And the only way to feel whole again is to gently gather those pieces back. This is not about closing your heart. It's about protecting your essence. True intimacy requires openness. Yes, but not at the cost of your alignment. When you step into intimacy with presence and self-awareness, you're not just offering your body. You're offering your vibration, your thoughts, your inner world. And that offering is sacred. It's not something to be given carelessly or out of emptiness. When you know your worth, You no longer seek connection to be filled. You connect because you are already full. And here's where everything starts to shift. Desire transforms. You no longer feel the need to chase affection or prove your value through connection. Instead, your presence becomes the magnet. Your wholeness becomes the most attractive force. And people feel it. The right people will be drawn to your clarity. The wrong ones will fall away, unable to anchor into a frequency they cannot match. This is energetic alignment, not through force, but through the natural law of vibration. It's not that you lose the longing for love or passion. You simply begin to approach it differently. You wait for connection that feels nourishing, not addictive. You choose moments that ground you, not scatter you. You seek pleasure that heals, not masks pain. And in that shift, intimacy becomes something deeper. Not just an act, but a doorway to remembering who you truly are, a reflection of your own self-love mirrored through another's soul. So, if you've ever asked yourself why certain connections left you confused, tired, or emotionally off balance, know this: it was never about your weakness. It was about energy. It was about a lack of intention, not a lack of worth. And now, with this awareness, you hold the power to change that, to reclaim your essence, to step into intimacy as a conscious creator, not a passive participant. This is where healing begins, and it is only the beginning. There is a quiet revolution that begins when you stop giving yourself away in pieces, when you no longer feel the need to be everything for someone just to feel something in return. When you shift from chasing connection to cultivating resonance. And this revolution doesn't start outside of you. It begins within. In the still moments when you choose to honor your energy before your desire. When you ask yourself, is this encounter aligned with my spirit, or is it just a distraction from my discomfort? This is the level of awareness that changes everything. The moment you understand that intimacy is not about access, but about exchange. You're not just letting someone in, you're letting their energy in, their unresolved past, their beliefs about love, their emotional rhythms. And if you are not present to what they carry, you may unknowingly carry it for them. You may feel things that aren't yours and confuse them for your own. This is how people slowly lose touch with their center, through unchecked exchanges that blur the line between their truth and someone else's burden. But awareness doesn't mean closing off. It means choosing wisely. It means slowing down before opening up. It means observing how someone speaks to their own soul before you let them whisper into yours. When you do this, you're not avoiding connection. You're preparing for a deeper one where you're not just touched, you're seen, one where your energy isn't consumed, it's honored. And that kind of connection doesn't leave you feeling less. It leaves you feeling more of who you've always been. Jung often spoke of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we ignore, but that still influence everything we do. In unconscious intimacy, the shadow becomes the guide. We find ourselves drawn to people who mirror our wounds, who activate our unmet needs, who reflect our buried fears. And while these relationships feel intense, they are rarely peaceful, because they were never built on clarity. They were born from echoes. And what begins in the shadow can only become light through conscious reflection. But you can bring that light. You can choose to no longer be led by the part of you that just wants to feel something, even if it costs you everything. You can learn to discern what feels expansive versus what feels entangled. You can pause long enough to ask, does this connection remind me of my wholeness or my pain? That one question alone can save you years of heartache, because when you know what your energy deserves, you stop settling for what only feeds your loneliness. And in that knowing, a new kind of power emerges. You don't become cold. You become sovereign. You don't run from love. You redefine it, not as something to fix you, but as something to grow within. From this place, intimacy no longer drains your spirit. It becomes an offering made in truth, met in balance, and sealed in mutual respect. And for the first time, your energy stops scattering. It starts returning. Once you begin calling your energy back, truly, consciously, you notice something else. Clarity. It returns like a long-lost friend. The fog begins to lift. Your mind stops running in loops. Your heart feels less anxious. There's space again inside of you. Space that was once filled by echoes, distractions, or the emotional residue of others. And in that space, something sacred is reborn. Your own voice, your intuition, the soft, steady rhythm of your authentic self, the one who never needed to be fractured in order to feel loved. This is what most people miss. Reclaiming your energy is not just about detaching from others. It's about reuniting with yourself, with the parts of you that went unnoticed in past connections, with the boundaries you silenced to avoid being left, with the dreams you put on hold to make someone else feel comfortable. When you bring all those pieces home, you begin to operate from fullness. And when you're full, intimacy becomes an expression, not a transaction, a sacred extension of your wholeness, not a desperate attempt to fill a hole. It's also in this process that life begins to shift around you. Opportunities return, motivation comes back, your focus sharpens. Not because anything outside has changed, but because your energy is no longer dispersed. It's unified, it's directed, and people begin to respond differently. Those who once took without giving fade from your life, and those who meet you with presence begin to arrive. This isn't magic, it's energetic law. When you honor your vibration, your life aligns to match it. Jung called this process individuation, the integration of all your scattered parts into one harmonious self. And when you bring this level of presence into your intimate experiences, you no longer repeat the same cycles. You no longer attract from your wounding, you attract from your wisdom. You're no longer at the mercy of unconscious patterns. You're rooted in truth. And this truth guides you to people who resonate with your highest self, not your unhealed self. Of course, the world may not understand this at first. Some may say you've changed, that you've become guarded. But you'll know the truth. You haven't closed off. You've simply stopped leaking. You've stopped giving pieces of yourself to people who were never meant to carry them. You've stopped mistaking connection for closeness when it only brought confusion. And in doing so, you've made space for real love, the kind that uplifts, aligns, and expands. So now, take a moment. Ask yourself, where is my energy right now? Is it fully here, fully mine, or is part of me still lingering in places that no longer hold life? The answers may surprise you, but once you ask, you've already begun the return. You've already taken the first step toward wholeness. And that step will lead you home, back to the self that never truly left, only waited to be reclaimed. One of the most overlooked truths about intimacy is this. It's never just about the moment. It's about the momentum, the energetic ripple that follows you into your thoughts, your mood, and your decisions days or even weeks later. That's why someone can be long gone from your life, yet their presence still lingers in your habits. You pause before trusting again. You doubt your instincts. You avoid silence because you fear what might rise up in it. This isn't because you're weak, it's because energy was exchanged, but never released. We often think we've moved on because we've stopped talking to someone. But silence isn't the same as closure. Closure happens when energy is reclaimed, when you retrieve the parts of yourself you gave away while seeking love, approval, or safety. And until you do that, you may keep encountering versions of the same lesson. Different faces, same frequency. This is why the cycle repeats. Not because you're cursed, but because your energy is still vibrating at the level of the last unresolved exchange. The good news is, you don't have to wait years for healing. You don't have to relive old stories or reopen old wounds just to find release. Sometimes, healing begins with a decision. I no longer give permission for my past connections to drain my present power. That declaration alone is an energetic shift. It signals to your subconscious that you're done giving away your peace for the sake of unreciprocated closeness. It says, I'm ready to be whole now, not later. Not when someone else finally gives me what I deserve. Now. And from that space, you start to make different choices. You don't accept attention in place of connection. You don't confuse chemistry with compatibility. You no longer trade your clarity for the thrill of being seen, because you've seen yourself now. And that self is too sacred to be diluted by fleeting interactions that only echo your fears. Now you choose people who add peace to your spirit, who leave you feeling more connected, not more confused, more rooted, not more restless. You also become more protective, not out of fear, but out of reverence. Your energy is no longer up for grabs. You no longer ignore the signs your body gives you, the unease, the heaviness, the disorientation. You honor those signals. You see them for what they are. Messages from your soul, alerting you when your essence is being compromised. And when you begin to live this way, you no longer need to heal from every connection. Because now, you only enter those that feel healing by nature. Let this be your reminder. Your energy is sacred currency. And every time you give it away without intention, you deplete the very reservoir you need to build your most aligned life. But every time you reclaim it, you restore your strength, your joy, your clarity. And the world begins to respond, not to who you were in past relationships, but to who you've now become in your wholeness. There's a moment in the healing process that feels eerily quiet, not because nothing is happening, but because everything inside you is recalibrating. It's the stillness that arrives after reclaiming your energy, when you're no longer tethered to noise disguised as connection. For some, this quiet feels uncomfortable at first. We're so used to chasing stimulation, attention, or emotional highs that the absence of chaos feels unnatural. But this is not emptiness. This is restoration. The space where your nervous system begins to exhale, where your soul finally has room to speak. And in that silence, you hear the truth. You never needed more experiences. You needed deeper presence. You needed to stop leaking your essence in places that could never hold it. You needed to stop mistaking being wanted for being valued. Because the truth is, not everyone who desires you is capable of holding space for your energy. And not everyone you feel drawn to is meant to carry a piece of your spirit. That discernment comes only when you're still enough to feel what resonates versus what simply distracts. As you begin honoring this truth, your standards rise, not from bitterness, but from clarity. You don't judge others for what they can't offer, but you no longer sacrifice yourself trying to make it work. You stop trying to be easy to love and start being committed to loving yourself first. You start asking different questions. Does this connection make me feel more like myself? Does it reflect the peace I've cultivated or threaten to unravel it? These are the questions that align you with energy that is nourishing, not draining. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And every intimate exchange either moves you toward that truth or pulls you further from it. This is why awareness is not optional. It's essential, because without it, you keep giving your light to people who live in shadows they have no intention of healing. You keep mistaking chemistry for connection, and end up wondering why joy always slips through your hands. But when you awaken, you stop repeating. You start choosing, and your life begins to reflect your inner transformation. That's when intimacy becomes what it was always meant to be, an expression of wholeness, not a plea for it. A place where two complete souls meet, not to fix each other, but to see each other. Not to escape life, but to deepen it. These are the relationships that don't leave you questioning your worth. They reinforce it. They don't drain your purpose. They amplify it, and in their presence, you realize that true connection doesn't take from you. It adds to you. Gently, powerfully, permanently. So, if you've been in that quiet place, if you've felt yourself slowly returning to center, trust it. That's your energy coming back. That's your power-gathering strength. That's your soul preparing to only say yes to what truly matches your vibration. And when that moment comes, when intimacy arises again, from a place of alignment, you won't be afraid. You'll know. You'll feel it in your bones. This time, it's not about losing yourself. It's about expanding together. You'll know the difference when it arrives. The kind of connection that doesn't rush, doesn't demand, doesn't leave you questioning your worth the next morning. It will feel like exhale, not performance. Like peace, not urgency. There will be no energetic hangover, no sudden heaviness in your chest, no unexplained sadness days later, because real intimacy is energetically clean. It doesn't borrow from your spirit to temporarily soothe your ego. It meets you where you are and honors what you bring. And in that space, you finally feel what you always deserved. Safety in your own presence, even when shared with another. This is where the shift becomes permanent. You begin to realize that intimacy was never the issue. It was the intention behind it. It was the energy in which it was approached. When you show up from wholeness, you no longer allow people to treat your soul like a stop along their journey. You become intentional with every bond. You understand that sharing yourself is sacred. And suddenly, your energy stops leaking into relationships built on projection and fantasy. It begins to flow only into what is true. There's a calm power that rises in those who've reclaimed their energy. They walk differently. They speak with quiet conviction. They're no longer swayed by appearances or sweet words. They feel into presence, alignment, and frequency. They can tell when something feels off, even if everything looks right on paper. They trust their body's wisdom. Their intuition becomes louder than their conditioning. And because of that, they attract different experiences, ones that reflect their growth, not their past. Jung often reminded us that the unconscious always has its hand on the wheel, unless we make it conscious. And so many people are still living in loops, guided not by awareness, but by wounds disguised as desire. They think they're choosing, but really, their trauma is choosing for them. But the moment you become aware of what you've been unconsciously repeating, the pattern begins to dissolve. You start to choose from clarity, from alignment, and the universe responds not with chaos, but with coherence. From this space, intimacy becomes a co-creation, not a collision, a dance, not a demand, a mirror, not a mask. You see yourself reflected back in healthy ways, not as someone who needs to be fixed, but someone worthy of being met in their fullness. And you begin to understand. Intimacy isn't just about who you share your body with. It's about who you allow to touch your energy, who you invite into your emotional field, and who you trust to witness the most sacred parts of you, without distortion. This kind of love doesn't come by chasing. It comes by aligning. It arrives when you've done the work to clean your energy field, to understand your patterns, and to choose with reverence instead of reaction. And when it arrives, you're ready. Not because you were waiting, but because you were becoming. Becoming the kind of person who no longer fears connection, but embraces it, from a place of power. Because you know what you allow into your field now is a reflection of what you've healed. There's a moment, quiet but undeniable, when you realize you're no longer haunted by the people who once had access to you. The late-night thoughts begin to fade. The tension you used to carry without noticing loosens its grip. You feel lighter, not because they apologized, not because anything changed on their end, but because something shifted within you. You stopped holding their energy. You stopped letting their presence echo inside your nervous system. You didn't just move on. You reclaimed your field, and that's a victory no one can see, but one your soul will never forget. So many people think closure requires two. But energetic closure, that belongs only to you. It's not about final words. It's not about explanations. It's about taking your power back from places that never honored it. It's about releasing the contracts you made in silence. The ones that said, "I'll keep carrying your pain if it means I'm not alone." And once you release those contracts, your energy no longer vibrates with grief. It vibrates with freedom. And from that frequency, your life starts to unfold in ways you never thought possible. People around you may not understand what's changed, but they'll feel it. You won't flinch the way you used to. You won't bend your boundaries just to be liked. You'll radiate something new, a calm rootedness that says, "I know who I am now." And from that place, your energy becomes a filter. It naturally repels what once attracted you from a wounded place. You're not guarded. You're embodied. You're not jaded. You're just clear. And clarity, in this world, is a rare and sacred thing. This is how you begin to navigate intimacy with wisdom. You pause long enough to listen to your energy before you offer it. You don't mistake pressure for passion. You don't chase what isn't showing up with the same level of care. And you stop assigning meaning to connections that only confuse you. Instead, you let peace be your guide. You let your nervous system speak before your desire does. And when something doesn't feel aligned, you walk away, not because you're afraid of connection, but because you finally respect your own. This is where intimacy becomes art. A conscious choice made from strength, not lack. A sacred moment where both people meet without agendas, without old stories quietly directing the exchange. It becomes a space of presence where healing happens without force, where love flows freely, because there's no longer a need to prove anything. And this kind of intimacy, it doesn't drain, it doesn't distort, it expands, it grounds, it heals, and it lasts. Not because it's perfect, but because it's rooted in truth. So, if you've reached this place where silence feels safer than chaos, where solitude feels like sanctuary, and where your own energy finally feels enough, honor it. This is your return, not to who you were, but to who you were always meant to become. The version of you that no longer fragments in the face of desire, the version of you that holds yourself sacred, and in doing so calls in the kind of intimacy that doesn't need to be chased, only received. Now that you've begun to reclaim your energy, you may notice something else. The world feels different, not louder, but clearer. You're not overwhelmed anymore. You're attuned. You're no longer reacting to every emotional current. You're observing them, sensing their source, choosing whether or not to respond. This is the beauty of energetic wholeness. It doesn't just change how you experience relationships, it transforms how you experience everything. Your work, your creativity, even the way you sit with yourself in silence, becomes more meaningful. Because when your energy is finally yours again, you begin to move through life with intention. Every decision carries more power. Every interaction feels lighter or heavier, and you trust that feeling. Your body becomes your compass. Your spirit becomes your guide, and you no longer need external validation to feel connected. The noise fades, the urgency disappears, and what's left is clarity. Pure, rooted, unapologetic clarity. This is what happens when you stop abandoning yourself in exchange for being seen. The intimacy you seek, it starts to seek you, but not in the same form. It comes wrapped in calm presence. It feels like stillness instead of chase. It offers safety instead of confusion, and it holds your energy gently instead of pulling it apart. These new connections don't trigger survival patterns. They mirror your wholeness. Because like calls to like, when you radiate alignment, only those resonating with it can truly step into your field and stay. The rest falls away, not with drama, but with grace. Jung once said that the greatest burden a child can bear is the unlived life of the parent. In a similar way, The greatest burden we often carry in adulthood is the unlived truth of who we really are. So much of our pain comes from betraying our own energy just to fit in, just to be loved. But when you begin to live from alignment, from your truest self, you drop that weight. You stop asking for approval from people who can't see your light. You stop watering yourself down just to avoid being alone. And ironically, that's when you're no longer alone. Because now you're with yourself. And from that sacred union, everything else begins to reflect what you've built within. Intimacy that honors, partnerships that respect, desires that align. Your inner world begins to shape your outer experience, not the other way around. This is the spiritual architecture of a healed life, not one built on illusion, but on integration. So, if your energy has returned to you, if you've made it this far in your journey of reclamation, understand this: you're not just healing your past, you're building a new future. One where intimacy is no longer the source of your suffering, but the soil from which your expansion grows. And in that future, you don't just love, you love in truth. You love without losing. And you are loved not for fragments, but for the fullness of who you are. This is the invitation now, to live from the center of your own energy. To no longer spill yourself into places that don't reflect your truth. To see intimacy not as a risk, but as a sacred mirror, revealing what you've healed and what you still carry. Every moment you choose presence over pattern, every time you pause before surrendering your body and ask, "Is this aligned with my soul?" you rewrite the story. You change the vibration. You no longer pass down cycles of unconscious connection. You embody a new legacy, one of reverence, awareness, and personal power. Because real power isn't loud. It doesn't chase, doesn't beg, doesn't cling. It simply knows. It knows when to open, when to walk away, when to trust that what's meant will never ask you to abandon yourself to receive it. And this kind of power, the quiet, rooted, sovereign kind, is the energy that transforms not just your relationships, but your entire life. You'll notice your vision returns. Your creativity deepens. Doors open that once felt sealed shut. And it's not magic. It's alignment. Every person who enters your life from this moment on will meet a different version of you. The one who is no longer fragmented, no longer seeking to be completed, no longer confused about their worth. You've done the inner work. You've called your energy back from old rooms, from names no longer spoken, from memories that once held you hostage. And now, in this moment, you stand whole, not because you've never been broken, but because you've woven yourself back together with intention, breath, and courage. This is the future you're building now, one where intimacy feels safe again, not because it's perfect, but because you are conscious within it. One where your body is not a battleground, but a temple. One where your desires don't control you, they serve you. One where you no longer lose yourself in connection, but discover yourself more deeply through it. That's the beauty of energy lived intentionally. It keeps giving back. It keeps expanding. And it never asks you to shrink. So, ask yourself now, honestly, who do I become when I share my energy? Do I expand, or do I disappear? And from that question, let your choices flow. Because your energy is your most precious currency. It creates worlds, reshapes timelines, and attracts exactly what matches your vibration. Protect it, honor it, and only share it with those who can hold it with grace. If this message has stirred something inside you, let it anchor. Let it settle in your chest like a truth you always knew but had forgotten. And as you move forward, may every encounter be filtered through the light of this awareness. May every intimate act be sacred. And may you never again forget the power that lives within your presence, waiting only for you to choose it